Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you recognize that your dream was placed in your heart for a reason. This week's guest is Kaia Allen-Bevan, and she holds many roles, but just to name a few. Kaia is a racial justice advocate, public speaker, the founder and director of YouthTheGap, and the director of Edge of Difference. It was so wonderful to talk with Kaia and to learn more about her work. So let's dive into this episode featuring Kaia Allen-Bevan.
So my name's Kaia, pronouns are she, her. I am first a racial justice advocate. I've been doing that for the past 6 years now. Started when I was 16/17, already wanting to, from my own self-learning and self-education, wanting to bring that to light and invite people to be a part of that discussion and realise change doesn't have to be left to the activists to do, because I think everyone is in their own right an activist. It just looks different. Their advocacy or their allyship looks different and their role in change looks different. So inviting everyone to be a part of that process. And from there, I kind of birthed my journey into Edge of Difference, which I am the director of engagement and impact. So I do everything to do with client liaison and community building, and could be doing data one day. So my role is very diverse in the world of diversity, equity and inclusion. But also a passion of mine for a long time has been education and young people. So from being in youth work and then being a teacher, I founded YouthTheGap back in February 2024, which tackles educational inequities within school. So it's kind of one of the many hats that I wear.
That is so wonderful. We love lots of hats. That's so exciting to hear. I would love to know more about what got you started with all of this work. It sounds like you have such a wealth of experience and so many different lived experiences that impact the work that you're doing, especially when you're talking about being a teacher and just doing all of this work. Tell me about that path to want to get involved in social action and making a difference. Tell me about that journey for you.
Yeah, so I remember in school really questioning the education system because I felt there were things that were missing. And I was like, okay, there's clearly things that are missing. Why is that not being shown? And I remember reading a text by John Agard, Checking Out Me History. And I remember feeling so much pride and joy reading that because it was the first time really picking up a text that I felt like encapsulated Black voices. But the reception in the classroom in terms of how white people saw addressing it versus that in relationship to Black and majority students in the classroom versus teachers, it felt like such an interesting dynamic that was happening that I couldn't understand in terms of words. And I remember that being really a catalyst to think, why is this the case, and really be curious about it. So as soon as I left school, literally the first day from when we finished GCSEs, I was like, no one can find me. Did my own kind of journey with self-learning about my history, my lineage, and kind of the realities of the injustice going on in the world, and thinking, if I'm doing this all at 16, doing my own research, reading books, watching documentaries, reading articles, I doubt people around me are doing it to that same degree. So I'd love to present an opportunity for people to learn with me as I go, and really create a platform that is designed for that, where it doesn't feel like you have to know everything in order to be a part of the journey, to learn things that actually, we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes, and really normalizing that. So I started sharing that in the digital realm back in 2019, I believe. Naturally, when 2020 happened with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, may they both rest in peace, it kind of, in a way, brought a light to my work, of which before was questioned, and being like, oh, so where did you get that source from? Well, that's not really going on. And I was like, well, I've done my research, I can tell you. So it kind of compacted and brought validity to what I was doing. And during that time, I founded and co-organised the BLM movement that was happening in my own town. And that was 10,000 to 15,000 people in the streets, campaign stretched for a year and a half, and really kind of compelled and compacted my passion within social justice, within social action, and what that meant on a grassroots level in organising and movement building. in that time as well, I was a youth worker. So I've also finished A-levels, youth worker, working specifically with Black and Global majority young children aged 11 to 25. Me at 18 doing that, sometimes working with people who are older, and I'm just like, whoa, what is this? But just seeing the necessity for this work. And I did that for about a year and a half, and the opportunity to go into teaching came about. And so I was like, I want to bring my learnings from youth work into the education sector to truly make change, but felt like I was just hitting glass walls or even concrete ceilings. No matter what I did to try and change internally, things would be taken to HR, line managers, senior leadership, and nothing would happen. So I felt the limitations, but didn't want it to be a wall of which I turn away from, but rather I know that I can break through this wall if I do it on my ones and bring people with me and set a different tone. So what led me to found YouthTheGap, which is all kind of inspired from that journey of being both youth work and education. And at that same time, when I delivered a TEDx talk back in 2022, which is all about decolonizing the revolution, my colleague and one of my dearest friends was so happened to be watching at that time. Didn't know her at that time, but I'd say 5-6 months later, I would then be working with her as first the anti-racism and allyship lead in a company that used to be Watch This Space, and now rebranded to Edge of Difference as the director of engagement and impact. So it's kind of like it's not a linear journey at all. I think in terms of when I put events together, I'm like, okay, I don't know how it's come together in that way. But I think there's been almost puzzle pieces that have been kind of aligned together as naturally has progressed on this journey. And so, yeah, it's kind of like my journey getting there.
That is wonderful. I think you told that story so beautifully and so chronologically, and I think that leads me up perfectly to talk a little bit more about Youth the Gap and the work that you're doing now. Can you tell me about Youth the Gap? I think like I told you before we started recording, I've seen so much on social media, and you're absolutely killing it with so much of the education and the information you're putting out. I think it's incredible. So tell me a little bit more about Youth the Gap, what you're working on now, what you're excited about. Give me the whole scoop.
Yeah. So YouthTheGap is which is wild, multi-award winning consultancy that's on a mission to reimagine education by tackling the inequities with schools. What I've seen in the past is that there's almost been helicoptering and saviorist approaches which don't really work with schools if you haven't worked in them. But from working in schools and seeing how they operate, I kind of knew the barriers of what would stop collaboration from happening, but also what could stop a collaboration from even progressing, which the two barriers really was financial cost and also in terms of the capacity of staff and the school itself and understanding the culture and all of that kind of approach. So I brought those two barriers in mind and founded YouthTheGap, where we work with schools on a long-term basis and not just one-off, to tackle the inequities head on, but also really bring and reimagine the education in terms of the curriculum itself. So we often do curriculum support. We'll go in and do workshops and trainings, and that is a holistic stakeholder approach. So we involve young people, we involve parents, carer supporters, all educational staff, and wider educational stakeholders as well, such as your trustees and governors, to be a part of this change, to really compact or build off the back of an existing culture, or create a whole new one which is inspired by that allyship, by that coalition, and really wants to drive that meaningful change. Currently, at the moment, we also host public events as well to reimagine the education within the public space, because we recognise that education is an ongoing journey, and I know that myself from my own journey, and really wanting to present opportunities for the public to learn something new. So whether we partner with organisations or we fundraise for them on our behalf, we bring oftentimes taboo or difficult subjects into a space that's psychologically safe as much as possible, to have the brave and uncomfortable discussions, and engage people in that social change. When we have a look at the schools that we're working with, we're doing currently a audit with a local school, which covers everything to do with policies, to programs for kids and also curriculum review, and really specialized actions that we do off the back of benchmarking schools or where they're at on their journey, and engaging them in terms of what they believe they need to be working on. And we engage youth voice in that, parent voice, teacher voice, and wider stakeholder voice within that. I'm really excited to be closing phase 2 with them, which is all around the data collection in order to validate those results into now the actual action plan with them. That will be happening for the next 2 years, which is really, really exciting. We've been working with them since December, and we're progressing that journey forward. And fingers crossed, we're starting to launch that in different schools as well to really build upon the coalition of what we see it as and the movement that we're trying to be. So, yeah.
Again, that was just so wonderful. And that led me perfectly to my next question, which I love. You tell me, I think with all of this work, I would love to know some of the challenges that you've faced. This was just kind of springing to my mind because I feel like a lot of the work that you're doing is so necessary, but it is
Mhm.
challenging people to think about their thinking and think about their practices and really think about the ways that they might be wrong, which I think is
Yeah.
always really difficult. Can you tell me about how you approach that and maybe some of the challenges that you faced having those conversations with people? Because I think, like I said, so necessary, but also so hard. So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the learning points that I've seen from working in other organizations that I've really brought into our approach is that anything to do with the topics that we are talking about, you have to talk about regardless of the demographic you're talking to, age of 9 to 7, because psychologically, in terms of our bias and our stereotypes and assumptions, which really forms off the back of the fact your brain can process, only 11 out of the 11 million pieces of information you have in your brain, 40 of those. So no wonder you make stereotypes, assumptions off the back of what you do. So we approach any single subject we do from the baseline talking to a 7 to 9-year-old in order to make any topic more accessible, which in itself is a challenge because it means you have to think about big topics and therefore try and break them down into something that's accessible, understandable, but also doesn't coddle or further uphold the systems you're trying to disrupt. So really it's a whole ongoing process of evaluation, being like, okay, so how are we doing it currently? Is the messaging working well? Okay, what are we doing in terms of our workshops? Has that landed well? And luckily so far it's been a success. We've had a lot of great feedback from our young people in terms of the sessions, whether it is, the simple thing they go home, they tell their parents and the parents give us feedback, or even kids come and find me after and they say, I really enjoyed your assembly or your workshop or whatever. Hearing that feedback is really, really important to validate that, because even if the feedback is, that was really, really bad, I'd much rather hear that than not know at all. So really understanding that as a barrier and a challenge, but recognizing it's a necessity for us to do in order to make sure that our mission is truly what we stand for, which really is rooted in our values, rooted in our principles, rooted in our framework, which is deeply decolonial. And in terms of how me and my colleague do our work, we are very much understanding of that decolonial practice. So really wanted to bring that not only into our approach, but how we work together is really important as well. So I think for us, we don't see anything as impossible. I think really just a challenge is something of which to confront and find different mediums of which to challenge, change, test. Even if it doesn't work out, you try again. I refuse to back down, really. I think this is why we call ourselves a movement. And yeah, I think the fact that when we see the impact of our results from a simple thing of a mind change or a young person being able to smile a bit more, or to feel like they're being heard, to parents feeling like, aha, okay, I've learned something new, to teachers seeing an internal shift, wherever that may be, we see the impact of the results. So that's enough for us to validate and to keep going, basically.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And I love that you're breaking down the science and kind of the reasoning behind it, because I think that is so important as well. Just having that justification for everything that you do and having all of that to back it up. I think it's wonderful. And yeah, you're just on an incredible path. My next question is, as everyone's listening to this, I'm sure they're thinking this too, but how can people support you? How can they find you? How can they support the work that you're doing? Give yourself a little shout out, because I'm sure that that's what a lot of people will want to do after hearing all of this. So how can people support you?
Yeah, really lovely question. Follow us on social media. I think is a big one. I think we're really trying to meet people on different networks, especially the youth, because we realise that youth are in a very much digital age. So we want to make sure that we are not just doing the offline in-person delivery, that we're also reaching people and engaging online to make sure we're able to create a platform and a space for them too. Share our work. We love knowing new organizations, new schools, new organizations to partner with. So any recommendations, any nominations are brilliant because it means that we can therefore know how to navigate and do our process correctly in terms of the different networks of people. I think especially those who are in areas that are so-called developing or are in need of improvement, especially if it's a school, really that's a massive indicator that it's just a diverse group of people that need support and also a lack of funding and resources. So we don't see any kind of, if you see a problem school or a problem area, really is indicating so much more than it just being a problem. I think it's almost a lazy approach to have in labeling somebody. So we want to work with those who are deemed the most difficult or the most challenging because we see that actually they often unlock a key to understanding our work a lot more, to working with new people, to really build off the back of the work that we're doing to make sure that it truly is justice, because it shouldn't just be that we're working with the easiest and the most collaborative. We want to be working with the most challenging and the ones that actually do need the work, which are not those who are receptive. So yeah, any recommendations, nominations, come to our events as well. And even if you feel like you'd like to donate for a school or for our events, or even when we're doing a public facing event and fundraising for somebody else, it means that we can make an impact not only for our organisation, but for other organisations we're bringing with us. So there's many different ways you can support us, but even just send us a message and connect. We love connecting with new people.
I love that. So many ways to support, and I will definitely link a lot of that down in the description so everyone can check it out. I have one more question for you. Lots of young people want to create change and might want to get involved in this incredible work that you are doing, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What
Mhm.
advice would you want to share for those people who might be listening?
When I think of myself starting, I even just a simple thing of I started a blog the day of which I left school. So literally on the day of which I remember everyone was on the school fields taking like the end of year photos and everyone's gonna again go home. I didn't do that. Not to say that that's what I'm advising everyone to do, is just like isolate yourself. But if you have a dream and a passion, follow it and just get started, because you never know what it will lead to. People that I've collaborated with or organizations that I've worked with, I think even just the unromantic work of which, because I think we love to romanticize of being like, oh, we're going to do this, you're going to get here and everything, but nothing's linear. Everything is subject to change. And oftentimes you have to do the unromantic work in order to get there. So believing in yourself, knowing that your dream is placed in your heart for a reason, so pursue it, and you're not going to get the immediate gratification of your results instantly. So keep pushing forward, do the unromantic work, and also ask for support. So reach out to organizations, especially if you're a young person, youth-led organizations, to see how you can be supported by people who want to advocate for you and have your best interest. So keep pushing, keep doing it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, really.
So, just to give you a little bit of background, Kaia and I recorded this episode early-ish in the morning, and I remember having a little bit of that morning grogginess when we first started talking. But immediately after this conversation with Kaia, I was so energized because of how much she cares about her work, how passionate she is. You can really feel when Kaia's talking just how much she cares for other people, and I really loved that about our conversation. So, there is one question that I'd like to leave you with to close out this episode. What is the thing that sparks your passion and lights you up like Kaia's work lights her up? Have a think on that topic or that issue. Think about what that is for you and use that passion for good. Because to quote one of Kaia's pieces of advice at the end of our conversation, change comes when you recognize that your dream was placed in your heart for a reason. thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Kaia on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I'm working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.